Imagine discovering your entire life is a perfectly constructed lie, not from a stranger, but from the two people you trusted most in the world. And then imagine deciding that their happiness, their ultimate triumph, would be the precise moment you tear their world to pieces. It was a Tuesday night, late enough that the city lights outside our apartment window barely pierced the heavy, suffocating silence inside. At 2:47 a.m., time itself seemed to stop as my world crumbled around me, not with a bang, but with a horrifying discovery on a glowing screen. My name is Ethan. I'm 32, and up until 6 months ago, I honestly thought I had it all. 7 years of what I believed was a rock-solid marriage to Olivia, a decent job, a close-knit family, the whole American dream, neatly packaged. My younger brother, Caleb, 27, was the golden child, charismatic and effortlessly charming, the kind of guy people just gravitated toward. He was finally getting married to his fiancée of 2 years, and I was genuinely happy for him. At least, I was until I found out he'd been sleeping with my wife for God knows how long. It began subtly, as these things always do, with Olivia pulling away. She'd come home late, mumbling about being swamped with projects or her gym sessions running long. Sometimes, she'd even say she was helping Caleb with wedding plans because his fiancée was overwhelmed. I've never been the jealous type. Not once. So, I just nodded, kissed her forehead, and asked if she needed anything. Looking back now, the urge to punch myself for being so naive is almost unbearable, but that's hindsight for you. What truly started to bother me was how unbelievably close Olivia and Caleb had become. They had these inside jokes I wasn't privy to. They'd whisper at family dinners, then burst out laughing when I asked what was so funny. Both of them constantly kept their phones face down, like they were guarding state secrets. When I finally called Caleb out for monopolizing Olivia's time, she actually defended him, telling me he was stressed about the wedding and I shouldn't be difficult. That should have been my first, blindingly obvious red flag, waving furiously in my face. One night, I walked into our bedroom around midnight and found her there, sitting on the edge of the bed, a soft, glowing smile on her face, fingers flying across her phone screen. The instant she heard me, she locked it, shoving it under her pillow like a guilty teenager. She claimed it was just Caleb asking about centerpiece options, then had the audacity to ask if I was getting jealous of wedding planning. I just laughed it off, mumbled something about not caring about flowers, and crawled into bed next to a woman who suddenly felt like a complete stranger. That's when the paranoia truly took root. Not the healthy kind that prompts communication, but the toxic, corrosive kind that makes you do things you're not proud of at 3 a.m. when sleep just won't come. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm absolutely not sorry either. The following evening, while Olivia was in the shower, I grabbed her laptop, synced her iCloud messages to my phone, and within 30 seconds of scrolling, I felt a wave of nausea so intense I thought I'd be sick right there on our hardwood floors. The messages between her and Caleb stretched back almost 2 years. 2 entire years of my life, where I'd been the idiot, dining with both of them, laughing at their jokes, planning family vacations, completely oblivious. There were flirty texts that made my skin crawl, intimate details I won't repeat, and explicit plans to meet up whenever I was at poker night or out on my morning runs. One message from Olivia hit me like a physical blow. "You've always been the better brother. I should have met you first." It was followed by a heart emoji that felt like a blade between my ribs. Caleb replied that soon they wouldn't have to hide anymore, to just be patient. I had to slam the laptop shut before I put my fist through it. I sat there on our couch, listening to the shower run, wondering how long this nightmare had been unfolding under my nose. How many times had I hugged my brother while he was actively betraying me in the most heinous way imaginable? But the message that truly made my blood run cold came 3 days later. By then, I'd been checking their chat obsessively, screenshotting everything, backing it up to 3 different cloud services like I was building a case for the FBI. Caleb sent her a long message, laying out their entire sickening plan. After his wedding, after the honeymoon, they'd sit me down together and tell me the truth. "We can't keep hiding forever," he wrote. "Once I'm married and settled, we'll come clean to Ethan. He'll understand eventually." Families forgive. Olivia responded that she was scared, but he was right. That she wanted to be with him openly because she was tired of pretending to love me. Reading that felt like being buried alive, like the walls of my entire life were collapsing in slow motion. They actually thought I'd just accept this, that I'd nod and smile and say, okay, these things happen, like some pathetic doormat who'd just roll over and let them walk all over me. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. And that's when something fundamental shifted in my brain. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was absolutely furious. And that fury crystallized into something cold, calculated, and terrifyingly patient. I could have confronted them right then. I could have kicked Olivia out that night and never spoken to Caleb again. But that felt too easy, too quick, too merciful for what they'd done. No. I wanted them to feel exactly what I was feeling, humiliated, betrayed, destroyed in front of everyone who mattered to them. Caleb's wedding was 3 months away. 3 months where I'd have to smile and pretend, to play the supportive brother and loving husband, all while gathering every single piece of evidence I could find. So, that's exactly what I did. I started acting normal again, maybe even better than normal. I was attentive with Olivia, incredibly helpful with Caleb's wedding planning, the model family man who suspected absolutely nothing. Every time Olivia kissed me goodbye before heading to the gym, I'd smile and tell her to have fun. Then I'd check the location sharing on her phone, which she'd forgotten she'd enabled years ago, and watch her drive straight to Caleb's apartment across town. At every family dinner, when they'd exchange those sickening, loaded glances, I'd raise my glass and toast to family loyalty, mentally rehearsing what I'd say when I finally dropped the bomb. I backed up months of messages, saved photos she'd sent him wearing his shirts in what was clearly his bedroom, documented timestamps of when she was supposedly at work but was actually at his place for hours. I consulted with a divorce lawyer, got my finances separated, moved money into accounts she had no access to, and planned every detail of my exit strategy like I was orchestrating a military operation. The hardest part wasn't the investigation or the preparation. It was lying next to her every single night, knowing she was thinking about him. Knowing that when she touched me, she was probably wishing I was Caleb. Knowing that our entire marriage had become a twisted joke, and I was the only one not laughing. But I held it together because I had a singular goal. A target date circled in red on my mental calendar, Caleb's wedding day. The happiest day of his life, when he'd be surrounded by everyone he loved, when he'd feel invincible and untouchable. That's when I'd burn their entire world to the ground. Those 3 months between discovering the affair and the wedding were the longest, strangest period of my entire life. It was like living in a movie where I was the only one who knew how it ended. Olivia threw herself into wedding preparations with an enthusiasm that made me physically ill. She was constantly on the phone with vendors, helping Caleb's fiancé pick out bridesmaid dresses, organizing the bachelorette party like it was her own wedding she was planning. She'd come home gushing about how perfect everything was going to be, how Caleb deserved the most amazing day, and I'd sit there, nodding and smiling, while mentally adding each comment to my growing list of reasons why what I was about to do was completely justified. The worst part was watching her genuinely light up whenever his name came up. This sparkle in her eyes that I realized she hadn't had for me in years, maybe ever. I kept my mouth shut and played the role of supportive husband and excited brother, even as every fiber of my being wanted to scream the truth at both of them. I maintained the perfect facade. I asked Olivia about seating charts. I offered to help Caleb with his vows. I even threw him a bachelor party where I gave a toast about brotherhood and loyalty while he got drunk and thanked me for always having his back. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it, but I just smiled, poured another round, and thought about his face in 3 weeks. During those months, I became obsessed with making sure my plan was absolutely flawless, that I had every piece of evidence organized and ready to deploy. I created a separate email account where I forwarded all their messages. I had a USB drive with backups hidden in my car. I documented every suspicious moment with dates and times like I was building a prosecutor's case file. My lawyer had the divorce papers ready to file the morning after the wedding, and I'd already signed a lease on a new apartment that Olivia knew nothing about. Everything was in place. I just had to wait for the right moment. And every day that passed felt like holding my breath underwater, waiting to surface. The hardest nights were when Olivia would cuddle up to me in bed and talk about how excited she was for Caleb's big day, how she hoped we'd have a vow renewal ceremony someday, how family was the most important thing in the world. I'd stroke her hair and agree with everything, all while thinking about how, in a few short weeks, she wouldn't have either of us anymore. And, honestly, that thought was the only thing that got me through it. About 2 weeks before the wedding, I noticed Olivia getting more anxious, more distracted, checking her phone constantly, even more than usual. One evening, I caught a glimpse of a message from Caleb before she swiped it away. Something about not being able to wait to see her at the rehearsal, with a winky face that made me want to put my fist through the drywall. She blushed when she saw me looking and mumbled something about him joking around about bridesmaid stuff, but we both knew that wasn't what he meant. That message confirmed what I'd suspected. They were planning something for the wedding weekend itself. Probably sneaking off during the rehearsal dinner or after the ceremony, one last rendezvous before their big confession to me. The thought of them being that brazen, that disrespectful, that confident I'd never figure it out, just added more fuel to the roaring fire that had been burning in my chest for 3 months straight. The week of the wedding arrived, and our apartment became wedding central. Olivia was gone constantly for final dress fittings, venue walkthroughs, and last-minute errands, probably half of which were covers for meeting up with Caleb one more time. I used the alone time to finalize my speech. The one I'd been writing and rewriting for months. The one that would detonate like a nuclear bomb in the middle of his perfect day. I practiced it in the mirror, timed it out, made sure every single word would hit exactly the way I wanted it to. Some people might think what I was planning was cruel or over the top, but those people hadn't spent 3 months watching their wife fall deeper in love with their brother while pretending everything was fine. The night before the wedding, Olivia was practically glowing with excitement as she packed her overnight bag for the hotel where the bridal party was staying. She kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me, and I said it back because at that point, what difference did 3 more lies make in an ocean of them? After she left, I sat in our empty apartment, well, her apartment soon, and felt nothing but cold determination. I wasn't nervous, wasn't second-guessing myself, wasn't worried about the consequences. I'd already grieved the loss of my marriage and my brother during those 3 months of pretending. Tomorrow was just making it official and public. The wedding day started early. I got ready alone, putting on my best suit, fixing my tie, looking at myself in the mirror and barely recognizing the guy staring back. I'd lost about 15 pounds during those 3 months, not from trying, but just from the stress eating away at me. And there was something harder in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I looked like someone who'd been through a war, which, in a way, I had been. I drove to the venue, a breathtaking lakeside estate with gardens and fountains that Caleb's fiancé's family had probably dropped 60 grand on. I watched everyone arriving in their fancy clothes with their oblivious smiles. My parents were there, looking proud. Olivia's family was there, looking excited. All these people who had absolutely no idea that in a few hours, their perfect day was going to implode spectacularly. I found my seat, made small talk with relatives, accepted compliments on my suit, and waited for my moment. The ceremony itself was torture. Watching Caleb stand at that altar, looking handsome and genuinely happy. Watching his fiancée walk down the aisle in her gorgeous white dress with tears of joy in her eyes. Watching them exchange vows about faithfulness and honesty while I knew he'd been betraying her with my wife for 2 solid years. I actually felt a pang of genuine pity for her in that moment. This innocent woman who had no idea she was marrying a cheater and a liar. But I told myself she was better off finding out now than after they'd built an entire life on his lies. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife and everyone cheered, I clapped along, thinking about how this would probably be the last truly happy moment Caleb would have for a very long time. The reception started, and I watched Olivia across the room, absolutely stunning in her bridesmaid dress, laughing with Caleb whenever she got close to him, their eyes meeting across the crowd in ways that made me sick to my stomach. She kept glancing at me too, probably making sure I wasn't noticing their little moments, but I'd just smile and wave, and she'd visibly relax. Caleb gave his own speech, thanking everyone for coming, talking about love and commitment and building a future together, and I almost laughed out loud at the hypocrisy of it all. Then came the best man speeches, then the maid of honor's toast, and then the DJ announced that the groom's brother wanted to say a few words. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 3 months. As I walked up to grab that microphone, I felt calmer than I had in years. I started safe, thanking everyone for coming, talking about how beautiful the wedding was, saying generic stuff about marriage and partnership that made people smile and nod along. I talked about growing up with Caleb, about family bonds and trust and loyalty, really laying it on thick while I watched him beam at me from his table where he sat with his new wife. Olivia was watching too, her expression soft and unsuspecting, probably thinking I was just being a supportive brother. Then I shifted gears deliberately. But you know what's really special about family? I said, my voice still light and friendly. It's that family knows everything about you. They see the real you. The person behind the mask we show the world. People were still smiling, still nodding, not catching the subtle edge creeping into my tone. And sometimes what family sees isn't pretty, I continued, letting my voice get harder. Sometimes family sees betrayal and lies, and people who pretend to love you while stabbing you in the back. The room started getting quiet now. People's smiles faded as they sensed something was profoundly wrong. Caleb's face changed, confusion mixing with the first hints of panic. Olivia had gone pale as a ghost. So, I want to share with all of you what I've seen over the past 2 years, I said, pulling out my phone. I want to show you the real Caleb and the real Olivia, and the real relationship they've been hiding from everyone in this room. The silence in that reception hall was absolutely deafening. I stood there with my phone in hand, and I watched the exact moment everyone realized this wasn't going to be a normal wedding speech. I started reading the messages out loud, beginning with the tamer ones and building up to the truly damning stuff. And with each sentence, I could feel the energy in the room shifting from confused to utterly horrified. I read Olivia's message about how Caleb was always the better brother and how she wished she'd met him first. I heard my mom let out a sharp gasp from her table. I read Caleb's messages about sneaking around when I was at poker nights, about planning their future together after he got married and settled, about how they just had to be patient a little longer. I showed photos on my phone of Olivia at Caleb's apartment wearing his shirts. Timestamps proving she was there when she told me she was at work or the gym. The bride, Caleb's wife of literally 2 hours, started crying before I even got halfway through. These horrible, choking sobs echoed through the dead silent room. Caleb jumped up from his table, trying to grab the microphone from me, but the best man and 2 groomsmen held him back, probably thinking he was just emotional and didn't want me embarrassing him. They had no idea I was just getting warmed up. I read the message where they planned to confess everything to me after the honeymoon, where Caleb wrote that families forgive and everything would work out fine. Well, Caleb, I said, looking directly at him with a chilling smile, here's your confession. Just a few months early. Hope you don't mind. Olivia was frozen in her chair, white as a sheet, tears streaming down her face, but not making a single sound. Some of her bridesmaids had physically moved away from her, like she was contagious. And her mom was staring at her with a look of pure disgust that almost made me feel bad for her. Almost. My dad stood up and tried to say something, probably trying to stop this train wreck, but I held up my hand and kept going without missing a beat. I told everyone about the 2 years of lies, the elaborate covers, the planning, the betrayal, every single detail I'd discovered during my 3 months of investigation. I told them about the nights I'd laid in bed next to Olivia, knowing she was texting him. About the family dinners where they'd flirted right in front of me. About the bachelor party where Caleb thanked me for being such a great brother while actively sleeping with my wife behind my back. The bride's father stood up and started yelling at Caleb, demanding to know if this was true. And Caleb just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, absolutely no words coming out. The bride's mother had her arms around her daughter, who was full-on sobbing now, her beautiful white dress shaking with each cry. A part of me felt genuinely terrible for her because she'd done absolutely nothing wrong except fall in love with the wrong guy. But this was the consequence of Caleb's choices, and she deserved to know who she'd just married before they built an entire life on his lies. "I lost my wife and my brother 2 years ago," I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite the absolute chaos erupting around me. "I just didn't know it until 3 months ago. And I decided you all deserve to know it too." I set the microphone down on the nearest table with a thud that echoed through the speakers, looked one last time at Caleb's completely destroyed face and Olivia's tears, and walked out of that reception hall with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear people shouting, the bride screaming questions at Caleb, my mom crying, general chaos exploding in my wake. But I didn't look back once. Just kept walking to my car and drove away from that disaster, feeling lighter than I had in months. The aftermath was absolutely nuclear. Exactly what I'd expected, and honestly, what they both deserved. The bride filed for annulment immediately, and it was finalized within 3 weeks because, apparently, you can do that when a marriage is based on fraud and lies. And her family demanded Caleb return every single penny they'd spent on the wedding. Caleb tried calling me probably 100 times that first week, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to absolutely desperate, but I never answered a single one and eventually blocked his number entirely. Olivia sent me wall after wall of text messages, begging for a chance to explain, saying she loved me and made a terrible mistake and we could work through this. But I'd already filed the divorce papers the Monday morning after the wedding and had my lawyer handle absolutely everything. She tried showing up at our apartment, but found the locks changed and all her stuff boxed up in the hallway with a note telling her the divorce papers were on top of the first box. My parents were devastated, caught between their 2 sons. And while my mom tried to get me to forgive Caleb because family is family, I made it crystal clear that ship had sailed the moment he decided to sleep with my wife. I stopped going to family dinners, stopped responding to group chats, essentially cut off everyone who suggested I was being too harsh or that I should have handled it privately instead of publicly. The people who mattered, my real friends, they understood completely and supported me. And everyone else could kick rocks for all I cared. Caleb's life imploded in spectacular fashion. The annulment was just the beginning of his problems. His ex-fiancée's family was extremely well-connected in the city where we lived, and word spread like wildfire about what happened. The kind of gossip that moves through social circles and professional networks at light speed. He lost friends who wanted nothing to do with a cheater. He ended up leaving his job because the humiliation and whispers made it absolutely unbearable. And last I heard through the grapevine, he'd moved back in with our parents because he couldn't afford his apartment anymore without his ex-fiancée's income. His social media went completely dark, his entire friend group scattered, and the golden child everyone adored became the cautionary tale everyone whispered about at parties. Olivia didn't fare much better, from what I heard through mutual friends who I'd asked to keep me quietly updated. Her friends dropped her one by one, not wanting to associate with someone capable of that level of betrayal, and her own family was apparently furious with her for humiliating them in front of everyone they knew. She tried reaching out a few times over the following months, emails and messages from new numbers I hadn't blocked yet, always saying the same things about how sorry she was and how she still loved me and wanted me back. The last message I got from her was about 6 months after the wedding. A long, rambling text about how she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, and would I please just talk to her for 5 minutes. I wrote back exactly one sentence: "You chose my brother over me, and now I choose myself over you." Then I blocked that number too and deleted the entire conversation without a second thought. As for me, I moved into my new apartment and basically rebuilt my entire life from scratch. I threw myself into work and got a significant promotion within 4 months. Started going to therapy twice a week to process everything. Picked up hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage, like playing guitar and hiking on weekends. I found a gym I actually enjoyed and started going religiously, lost the stress weight, and put on real muscle. Got a tattoo I'd always wanted but Olivia had said she didn't like. I went on dates when I felt ready. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to have options, to have women interested in me who didn't know about my past or all the drama. I made new friends through work and hobbies. People who knew me as just Ethan, not Ethan, the guy whose wife cheated with his brother. The strangest part was how much genuine peace I found in the silence. Not having to pretend anymore. Not walking on eggshells or wondering when the next lie was coming or who she was really texting. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it. If I think the public humiliation was too far. If I wish I'd just confronted them privately and moved on quietly like most people do. My answer is always the same. They had planned to humiliate me by confessing after Caleb's wedding and honeymoon, expecting me to just accept it and forgive them because that's what family does, right? They were going to blow up my entire life on their timeline, in their way, with their carefully prepared narrative. I just beat them to it and controlled the story myself. Simple as that. Did it hurt Caleb's ex-fiancée who absolutely didn't deserve any of this? Yes. And I genuinely feel bad about that part. But she also deserved to know exactly who she was marrying before they built a life and possibly had kids on his foundation of lies. Would I do it again? Absolutely, without a moment's hesitation, because the alternative was letting them think they could betray me in the worst way possible and face no real consequences for it. A full year later, I'm in the best shape of my life physically and mentally, making more money than I ever did while married, surrounded by people who actually value me and have my back, and sleeping soundly every night without wondering if the person next to me is thinking about someone else. The betrayal didn't break me like they probably thought it would. It just cleared out all the people who never deserved to be in my life in the first place. Caleb and Olivia wanted their perfect fairy tale ending where everyone eventually forgave them and moved on, where they got to be together without facing any real consequences for what they'd done. Instead, they got exactly what they earned: destroyed reputations, broken relationships, social isolation, and the knowledge that their selfish actions cost them absolutely everything that mattered. And me? I got my freedom, my self-respect, my peace of mind, and a life that's finally, genuinely, completely mine. I'm telling you, this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about taking back control. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have done things differently? Or would you have served up your own brand of cold justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.